Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL Podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL Podcast, your podcast to help you cruise a little bit smarter. And I am, as always, joined by my co-host, Christy. Christy, how are we today?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. Recording a little bit earlier than we usually do, which is kind of nice. I like this time, actually.
Yeah, I feel much more awake.
Yes, this is awesome. And we do have an exciting show to talk about, something a little bit different. And to talk about that show, we would like to welcome back Bryan to the show. Bryan, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How about you, Christine Lake?
Good. Busy workday. You're still in the middle, kind of your workday, huh?
Yeah, I'm playing a little bit of hooky, taking a late lunch and talking to you. It's not quite as much fun as talking to you live at a Run Disney event. We do what we can.
Yeah, it was so fun hanging out with you at Disneyland. So thank you again for running through the parks with me that day. And it was so fun. That was like one of the most fun weekends.
It really was. I know you already did the Run Disney rundown and there were definitely some things Disney can get better at. But I was listening to that and I don't think everybody who listens is going to capture just how amazing that weekend was and how fun it was to run at Disneyland and to be connected with this larger community in person, which I hadn't had a chance to do in as big a way as we did that weekend. So it was really fun.
Oh, yeah. The people and the atmosphere was just immaculate.
Huge. It was amazing. Oh, my gosh. Listen, like hanging out with you and listener Liz and obviously all the people that came to the meetup and Lake and family. Oh, it was just really just thinking back, just like this little tiny bit of conversation now, just like sparks all of that like good energy. So, which is good because we can use that for the podcast today.
Well, turning towards the topic of our show, we are sailing out of the Big Apple.
Sorry, yeah.
The Big Apple. That would be New York City.
Bryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about this cruise and why you picked this sailing?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally I had booked a magic sailing out of San Diego because I wanted to be on the West Coast and experience the magic. My sister had been talking about wanting to go on a Disney cruise, and she was not interested in sailing out of San Diego because she's done the Baja, Mexico area before. And so I was kind of like, hey, when are we gonna do that? And I went back and looked on the calendar to see what other sailings were happening over my kids' fall break. And I didn't really want to do Port Canaveral or anything there. And then I noticed, there's a New York sailing to Bermuda. And I was instantly super intrigued. I had never been to New York City before, but I figured sailing out of a city like New York past the Statue of Liberty doesn't get more iconic than that. And Bermuda was interesting. And so we decided we were going to switch to that cruise. And then I asked my sister if she's interested in coming along. And she ended up joining us for that cruise as well, because her kids had wanted to see New York. And she thought it would be a really unique place to visit, which was important to her. She wasn't sure she'd ever do more than one Disney cruise and wanted it to be somewhere really interesting. And so before we knew it, we had switched and we're planning an epic vacation out of New York to Bermuda.
And how many nights was that sailing?
This was a 6-night sailing. So you get a sea day there. We were going to get 3 days in Bermuda, an overnight. So the ship would actually stay in port overnight. And then it was going to go out and do pirate night and then was supposed to come back for a 3rd day in Bermuda. Ended up changing a little bit. We can talk about that later. And then it had a sea day on the way back. So nice long cruise. I like those 5, 6, 7-night cruises a lot. Chance to really explore Bermuda, which ended up being one of my favorite places I've ever been. So
yeah, I feel like once you get to that like 5-night and above, it's like when you really can peak. You get a great balance of like doing the things you want to do, but also time to relax and just enjoy your favorite parts of a ship.
Absolutely. And we did a number of firsts on this sailing. This was my first sailing as Gold, and also my first time experiencing the spa, because in the past I never thought I'd have time for it. After you have a little bit longer sailing and have sailed a few times, you can start to explore things that maybe weren't at the top of your list and find out how much you enjoy them.
Awesome. Well, we are going to backtrack just a little bit because, as you said, sailing out of New York is kind of iconic. You've got a lot of things to do there. So did we spend any time pre or post cruise in New York? And if so, give us kind of some highlights of what you did.
Yeah. So the way things worked out with my kids' fall break, we just flew in the night before and had dinner in New York City before we sailed out. But on the way back, we ended up the ship got in on Friday and we sailed out on Monday morning. Flew out on Monday morning. So we spent the whole long weekend in New York and did all the things. It was my first time to New York City, and we got the city pass and used that to kind of arrange our itinerary. It gives you a discount to a bunch of the different tourist things. So we did the Empire State Building, we did some museums, we saw a Broadway show, saw Wicked, just had an incredible time in New York. It was a little fast, but New York's a fast-paced city, so it was a little exhausting after the cruise, I suppose. We were nice and relaxed coming into New York after the cruise and just had a really good time. It felt a little like a park trip because they were long days trying to get everything done. I would say between walking and the subways, you can get around pretty easily, and we had a lot of fun. I will say New York is one of those places where you're not going to find such a thing as inexpensive hotels, so it was a little expensive to stay in the city. The one tip that I learned is staying by the airport is a lot less expensive, so when we were going to fly out early Monday morning, we went and transferred Sunday night to a hotel by the airport so we could save on our hotel fare that last night when we didn't really need it, and we're just going to get up in the morning and go. But I think trying to stay by the airport, if you were going to try and do a lot in the city, would not be such a good idea because you take so long traveling from there into the city. But that balance helped.
Yeah. And even if you're taking public transportation, there's like a surcharge to get from the airport area into the city on public transportation. So it's eating up, especially with a large family, which we haven't talked about. Who did you travel with on this trip?
Yes. So this was my immediate family. So my wife and I and our 4 kids. And then we also went with my sister, her husband, and her 2 boys. So there were a total of 10 of us. We did not hang together in New York a lot. We kind of had our own things we were doing with our families in New York. We ended up staying at the same hotel, and so we saw each other a little bit, but our kids had different interests. But we were together on the cruise and had a lot of fun. It was my first time traveling with somebody else on a cruise. I know you've talked about cruising with friends. Cruising with cousins was a lot of fun. The kids had a blast, and I had a lot of fun getting to hang out with my sister on a Disney cruise, which I had never done before.
And your kids at the time of the trip were 15, 13, 11, and 8. So you had the gamut.
I was going to say they all had birthdays recently, so I was going to have to do some math to tell you how old they were then. But yes, and then my sister's kids were like 10 and 5, I believe.
Turning towards the cruise then, first off, how did we get to the port and how was the embarkation experience out of New York?
This was one of the challenges with a family of 6 and luggage. How are you going to get around in New York? And a couple months before the trip, I finally broke down and decided we were just going to, because we weren't spending any money on excursions, I took the money we were going to use on that and ended up hiring a car service to get from our hotel to the port. It was really not that far of a walk, but it was too far. I'm not Steve, and we couldn't drag all our luggage that far. And so we ended up renting a van, and my sister joined us in that van and ended up working out well. We used the same service from the airport to our hotel, then from our hotel to the port back to hotel, and then later from hotel to the airport hotel, where we had a free shuttle to the airport the next morning. And so it's expensive to hire a private transportation service in New York. There's no way around it, but it ended up reducing stress and working out really well for us. So not hesitate to recommend, I believe it was Precision New York Limos or something. That was the company, and they were great. Like, we really felt that it was worth the investment. In terms of the embarkation process itself, I had no idea what to expect first time sailing out of New York. I wasn't sure exactly how things would work because I had an earlier port arrival time than my sister. It wasn't too different, but we decided to just all go together and see what happened. And as we arrived, they were not really checking port arrival times. They were just taking everybody into the terminal. We showed up at about just before noon. The first port arrival time may have been 11 or something, so we weren't right first thing, but by noon they were letting everybody in, and it was the quickest, most continuous flow embarkation experience I've had anywhere. There was really no waiting. We were just in a line walking the whole time. It felt kind of just go, go, go. New York's a city that's very much go, go, go. And it was a little bit weird to just walk in and walk right on the ship. It took time. There was line, but we never stopped moving. And it was pretty fast, which was impressive to me. A little bit overwhelming, I think, for a first-time cruiser. My sister commented she was glad that she could just tell her kids to follow their cousins and follow us, and we knew what we were doing. And I said, yeah, but I kind of know what I'm doing, but this is a different experience. But it was very smooth, no complaints, just walked right on. Yeah, I think the only negative for me is I'm used to having a little bit of time to wait and anticipate that boarding. And it was kind of like, I'm in line. Oh, wait, I'm walking on the ship. I was going to, prep for this moment of seeing my sister get on the ship for the first time. And that kind of got lost because it just suddenly we were the line moved ahead and we were on the ship. But I don't think that's really a negative necessarily, just not what I was expecting.
How was it watching your sister get on the ship? So obviously you couldn't record her, or you weren't prepared for that, but you were just on. How did she and her kids react?
I think they were impressed with the ship overall, but we didn't have kind of the moment I was imagining. I think the chaos of just getting on there unexpectedly with a second to stop, I didn't really capture the reaction like maybe I wanted to, but I got the smell the second I walked on, which is always, that's that magic moment, right? When you get the smell as you can on the ship, and then you look and realize how beautiful the atrium is. And it definitely was a magic moment, maybe just not in the way that I had originally anticipated.
So then you're on board, all 10 of you. Did you go right to lunch?
We did. We headed right up to Cabanas, which we generally boarded a little bit ahead of when we did. I said it was smooth walking on, but it did take some time as we were walking. Everybody was in the line. And Cabanas was a little crazier. And then I realized trying to get seats for 10 people is a little bit crazy. We had to do a couple different tables and try and get them by each other, but we worked it out. And we had I think it was my favorite embarkation Cabanas lunch in terms of the food. Part of it is I think I've learned what looks good and is actually good and what isn't at Cabanas. I love that there's always, if you look for it, there's always a hot dessert item you can get a la mode on Cabanas. And that's usually the best dessert in my opinion. So yeah, it was a great Cabanas lunch. And then I think we got to exploring the ship, and before too long, rooms were opened. And yeah, we just did all those first day things, unpacking, decorating, checking out the kids' clubs, all the fun stuff.
What kind of rooms did your family book, and how many rooms did you like? What was your room configuration for how many people you had?
My family always ends up with 2 connecting staterooms, and we did deck 8, a veranda in the midship, which we had done that same exact room numbers on the Fantasy and loved that location. So that's where we were at. My sister decided to go ocean view on deck 2, partially concerns about motion. She gets pretty motion sick and like being lower in the ship. And then also to save some money, they figured they'd be okay with an ocean view. To be honest, I don't know that we used our veranda a ton. So there were a couple key moments where I was really glad we had it, but we love deck 4 as well. So I think you can have a great experience ocean view or veranda. We've done both and go back and forth depending on the sailing and costs and whatnot.
With you guys on different levels of the ship, did you find it hard to like meet up, or did we use what's it called?
iMessage.
Yeah, unfortunately, the rest of my family are not on the Apple bandwagon. I work somewhere where we have Android and Apple developers, and there's a constant battle between those groups. So we had to rely on the app messaging to communicate, but that worked pretty well. So we were able to communicate via the app messaging, and sometimes you have to open the app to refresh or whatever, but I never felt like we had real problems communicating or meeting up when we wanted to. It all just seemed to work pretty well for us. But I think the key was I did make sure that my sister and her family was aware of the importance of having an updated version of the app on their phone before they got on board, and that they knew how that would all work so that we had that in place.
Good tip, because especially in the very beginning and boarding, sometimes the Wi-Fi is real sketchy. I always say that you're like in a metal can. So yeah, sometimes they'll unlock all of Wi-Fi and really let the guests have access to it, and sometimes they don't. So sometimes you can have access to all of downloading things on your phone, and sometimes it just does not work at all.
The other thing that we did have installed besides the DCL app for communicating as a backup is I believe you can use WhatsApp to communicate if you're on different phone platforms. And I had suggested that my sister set that up. I don't recall if we ever actually ended up using it though, because the DCL messaging worked pretty well, but WhatsApp's another option if you've got different device types.
That's a good idea, because we have a cruise coming up where we're going to have different device types. Lake, who doesn't have an iPhone.
I'm the problem. It's me.
Okay. So New York has a pretty iconic sailway. Where did you guys experience that? Where were you for sailway?
Yeah, so that was one of the things. Our cabins were on the wrong side of the ship for sail away. So we went down to deck 4 for sail away. And that was great because you could cut back and forth. There's things to see on both sides of the ship. Right. So when I say the wrong side, we weren't on the Statue of Liberty side. But if you want to see, what do they call it now? The replacement of the World Trade Center, and I can't remember the name, and all of that side is on the opposite side. And so I loved being on deck 4 because it wasn't, surprisingly, not very crowded. And we got some great photos, and you could cut through the ship over to the other side very quickly and catch photos on either side as things came up. And so it was really convenient that way. I was really glad we did not have early dining. We had late dining because I know there was a lot of, no, you're not team late dining, but we had a nice time change to help support that.
Yes.
But like in our Facebook group ahead of time, there's a lot of chatter about prior sailings and some of them leaving a little later, which could cut into your dinner time with the iconic parts of the sail away.
Right.
As it was, we left pretty on time, so somebody probably could have made it to dinner and seen most of the sail away because we actually made it to the show. We decided they had, I think, the Golden Mickey's playing that night, and we decided to go see that, and that wasn't a problem. But depending on when they leave, if you've got early dinner, you could find yourself missing part of the sail away. But it really is incredible, and I do recommend Deck 4 just because it's easy to cut through and catch sights on both sides of the ship. It's really great. On the way back, it was great to have a veranda that on the way back was on the right side to see the Statue of Liberty because they came by like 5 a.m. and we did get up and go out on our balcony so you could see the Statue of Liberty all lit up and do that. And I really wouldn't want to do that, having to actually like feel like I was ready to go into the public spaces of the ship. It was great to go out on my veranda for that part.
I can't wait to see those pictures. Everybody should be looking at least one or two of them in the post on either Facebook or Instagram.
So, Bryan, you and your family are obviously gold, more experienced cruisers, but your sister was a first-time cruiser. Did you find that changed your like cruising dynamic for the sailing, that you were doing more things you wouldn't typically do?
I don't know that it changed the dynamic because she was a first timer in terms of what we did or didn't do. I definitely got to do some things that I wouldn't normally do. Different people have different personalities. But for example, my sister really loved trivia and game shows. So I did a lot more trivia and game shows than I might do if it was just me, because my wife's that's not her favorite activity. She'll do a little bit with us, but I don't usually always like to go by myself, and so that definitely improved things. I definitely spent a lot more time thinking about the first timer experience. One of the things that I realized pretty early on is there's a pro and a con to the Facebook groups. My sister did join the Facebook group. It can make you feel pretty overwhelmed, especially if you have a little bit of anxiety about things. And it can also give you a lot of FOMO. I hadn't really thought of that as much until part of it was our group. I thought we had a great Facebook group, but when they're very active, there can be a flood of information, right? And so as I realized that through the lens of, this is my sister's first time, it was helpful that I could tell her, hey, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. And she kind of went into it from the perspective of, yeah, I know there's going to be a gazillion things and we can't do it all. So I'm just going to go with the flow and have a good time, which I think was really good for a perspective for a first timer. I do wonder if she hadn't had me to say, hey, don't worry about this, don't do that, if it might have been a lot more stressful. So that's one of the cons, I think, sometimes to the really active Facebook groups, is they can just cause a lot of information overload and FOMO feeling. And so if you're thinking about going on a Disney cruise, there's a lot of good information, but you just got to be able to step back and go, hey, my first time, I'm not going to do it all. And I'm just going to go have a good time.
And we don't do it all, right? I guess we know and maybe have an opportunity more to schedule different tastings, but there is sometimes in those groups a lot of chatter about how you have to do so many activities in order to make your experience better. And I don't know, sometimes not knowing isn't such a bad thing too.
Well, and the thing with the groups is you are going to have people that want to do a little bit of everything, but from your perspective reading it, it seems like everybody wants to do everything. And that may not necessarily be true, but you're going to get everyone telling you that they think everything is great.
I also notice, especially if you've got people who maybe don't cruise quite as often in there, or it's their first time, they can hear rumors from friends that, so-and-so had a negative experience or this or that. And then they can get really worried. Am I going to have a negative experience? Those of us who've cruised a lot have found, I found at least a lot of it's your attitude going in. And then the other thing is you realize, things may not always be perfect, but I've gone enough to know how much I love it. And so if something's a little off, if my fried brie isn't perfect one night or this isn't perfect one night, it doesn't have to throw me off because I know I'll have another opportunity. And there's other things that I always like. And so that was the other thing I noticed, is there was some negativity. I think people genuinely concerned because they heard something. And it's important to realize that everyone's opinion, especially about things like food, can vary so vastly that you shouldn't let it worry you if you hear something that somebody didn't like something. Form your own opinion and go into it with an open mind.
Absolutely.
So we've got a couple sea days to fill at the beginning of the sailing, which is such a great way to start the sailing. You know, get yourself acclimated to a ship. Obviously, your sister is a first-time cruiser, so lots of new things. How did we spend these days? What kind of activities did you guys find you enjoyed doing? And did we try anything new?
I'll hit a couple highlights. We did the How Well Do You Know Your Family game show. And usually it's like a parent and a kid, but they let my sister and I do it together, which was really super fun. And to see how well we knew each other, that was one of the highlights for me, was playing that game with her. We did not win, but we had a lot of fun.
What questions? Like, give me an example. And
They had questions about if you could go anywhere, where would you go on vacation? They had questions about, they've got some fun questions with Match Your Mate. And the equivalent with the family ones are questions around when you may choose to release bodily gases and how you handle it, whether you blame people or not, and things like that. So, you got kids, you got to have some potty humor, I guess. So questions like that. I'm trying to remember what else. Oh, there was one about if you're on a deserted island and you could only have one thing, what would it be? And I think that the challenge playing with my sister was we do know each other pretty well, but being an adult, you're more likely to overthink things. And so that got us into trouble a couple times. Aside from the game shows and trivia, a couple other things. This was my first time doing the spa, and we ended up getting rainforest passes. And my wife and I and my sister's husband all got it. My sister, they sold out. They had them available ahead of time, which was the first time I've ever seen that. It ended up being, it was like 10 days in advance or something, just like a week or two in advance. And I saw it on the Facebook group, ran on and grabbed it for me and my wife, and we were able to get one for my brother-in-law, but there wasn't one left for my sister, but she said she didn't really care. I really love the rainforest room. I don't know that I would do it every cruise, but if I were to describe it to somebody, I would say it's an adult version of a splash pad, because you do have the sauna side, which I'm not a huge sauna person, but that was kind of fun. But the part that I thought was really the splash pad part is they've got these themed showers, and it's kind of like when you're a kid and you like to run through the sprinklers, or you go to the splash pad or whatever, and they have the buckets dumping on all you. It's like that for adults, because the showers have different water temperatures. They have different effects going on inside there, whether it's lighting or sound. And you can go take it can be cold and then switch to hot. And they've got different, nozzle types that are kind of doing different massages and stuff. I thought it was really fun and enjoyable. And then, of course, the heated loungers, can't complain about those. And then I also got a massage. So we really went all in on the spa this time, and I really enjoyed it. I would not do it every cruise, but I'm glad I took an opportunity to experience it. And it was a lot of fun. The reason I ended up doing it was we have a thing at work where we can give each other like recognition points, and you can cash them out for gift cards. And so I cashed mine out for a Disney gift card. So my coworkers basically paid for my spa pass, which I thought was a really fun way to use that. So if you happen to have something like that at work and you don't ever use it, Disney Cruise, a lot of them offer Disney gift cards. So, but yeah, the spa was a lot of fun. And then the other thing that was really interesting for me, like a lot of times when you've got wind, the aqueduct requires 2 riders. And so there's been a lot of times that I will go and have really fun time with one of my kids riding the aqueduct. And one evening we got together to do that, and I was expecting to go on over and over again. But now there's cousins involved, and the cousins came and seemed to be able to always find my kids right when I was there. And so I got abandoned and left alone because they had cousins to ride with, and so they didn't need dad to ride with them anymore. But that was okay. I still got to get a ride or two in. But say the kids loved Midship Detective Agency, so that was a lot of fun. They did that. What was interesting to me is two of the cousins that got together. I thought my sister's oldest didn't hang out in the kids club as much as I thought he might. He ended up hanging out with my 11-year-old who doesn't like the kids club a lot, and they just loved the pool deck and spent a lot of time on the pool deck. And the fact that the two of them were together was great. And so that's one of the advantages, I think, with when you can have cousins. They can, if they're not wanting to do the kids club, they can go off and do things together. My oldest has had on and off experiences, but she really enjoyed Vibe this time. And other Edge-aged kid, my son, really had a good time in Edge this time. I do feel like with the older clubs, with Vibe and Edge, the experience can really vary based on the group of kids from sailing to sailing. And so that's just a reality we've seen, but they all had really good experiences in the clubs this time.
Very cool. Well, why don't we turn this towards dining here? So we've got your 3 rotational dining, Animator's Palette, Enchanted Garden, and Royal Palace. How was your dining experience? What were some highlights? And what was your sister's thoughts on kind of the food and the dining experience?
Yeah, I was really curious how the Dream, I don't think we said we were on the Dream. I guess we all know that that was what was sailing out of New York, but it was the first time that I've ever been on a 6th night on the Dream. And I know the Dream didn't used to do 6 nights very often, so I wondered what menu they were going to do. They actually did the normal 7-night rotation menu and just dropped a pirate night. There was no pirate night menu. And so we were able to get the same. There's a primary and an alternate menu on the fantasy for each restaurant, and that's what we got, which was great. I love those menus. Everybody loved the food. My sister and her family loved the food. They got to try a lot of things. They tried some things I had never tried before, and I found some new favorites, things on the menu. I can't even remember what it was, but it's like I think it's lemon flavored. It's like a yellow sponge cake. It kind of looks like a Twinkie that has raspberry sauce on it on one of the dessert menus that I never tried, never would have thought to order. And it was one of my favorite things I've ever had. New favorite. We had the awesomest serving team I think I've had on any of my cruises. I was always a little worried, how good are our servers going to be? But in terms of both building a relationship with them and being really competent at their job, they were just phenomenal. So we really, really enjoyed dinner every night and can't say enough good stuff. We did do Apollo brunch and had a really good time with that with my sister and her husband. We were able to get a reservation in advance. And then when I boarded, I just went up and said, hey, can we get a table for 4 and add 2 more people? And they kind of hummed a hawed about whether they'd be able to do it, and then said, yes, we got you taken care of. So it wasn't a problem.
So you ate in the dining room every night for dinner then with the 2 menu sets. That's good, especially with a large crowd.
We did, and it was great. And we had an awesome table, especially in, is it Royal Court or Royal Palace on that ship? I don't remember, but we had the big round table as you first go in under the really cool chandelier that has the glass slippers up. If you look, it was like awesome table. So that was really, really cool. Royal Palace. Yes.
I mean, it's all the same to me. It's Royal something until it's Triton's, and it's all the same. I will never be the one on the podcast to get that nuance of what the different theaters are called. And it's just, that is never my forte. But did you guys end up seeing the shows most of the nights?
We saw all the Broadway shows because these are some of my favorite. Beauty and the Beast is my sister's favorite story, and she loved it. I love Believe. It's one of my favorites.
That's
and then
so cute.
Buckets and Boards was on board. And so we went and saw Buckets and Boards. I know they've been on the podcast, so shout out to them. My sister absolutely loved their show. They saw both the family and the adult one. I did not catch the adult show, but saw the family one, and it was phenomenal. I would love to go see them again. So that was really good. I don't remember what the other variety act was. We didn't catch the other variety act on board, but we made sure to catch Buckets and Boards.
So Beauty and the Beast is like the live action adaptation of it, and it's got some dark moments. What did the younger kids think of it? Did they go to the show as well?
All the kids went to all the shows, and I don't think they had any problems.
All right. Well, moving towards our ports, or should I say port, this is an interesting cruise because we do have an overnight, and Disney Cruise Line does not do a lot of overnight sailings. However, Bermuda tends to be the exception. So we had already mentioned that you actually did all of your booking yourself. We did not use Disney Cruise Line for anything. So what did we end up doing to fill these 2 days in Bermuda? And what were your overall thoughts on Bermuda?
As we went in, there weren't a lot of port adventures that looked super exciting to us for Bermuda. We did originally have one booked, and then Disney changed the schedule on it, and we decided to drop that in advance. I was just kind of looking at what can you do on Bermuda. I started with a lot of Google searching and just found article after article about interesting things. We are beach people. We know we wanted to go to the Pink Sand Beach, Horseshoe Bay, and spend some time there. We also heard that they had interesting caves, and then they've got this UNESCO World Heritage Site that's St. George, the original settlement that's a really old town there. And we found out that public transportation in Bermuda is quite accessible. And so what I ended up doing was finding the bus schedule and the ferry schedule and kind of planning things out. And we decided our first day, because we were overnighting, there's no real risk of you missing the boat. You know, the worst thing that happens is you get back later than you plan, you miss dinner, and you have to order room service or something. Like, that's not the end of the world. And so we decided to do our big, heavy day that day, and then figured the next day we would do the beach, and then the third day we'd play a little bit by ear. And so what we ended up doing that first day is we took the ferry to St. George, which is awesome. We got off the ship, and there was a little bit of time before the ferry left, so we walked around the port area. The port area in Bermuda is really cool. It's an old fort, and so there's like signs and historic old stone walls and stuff you can look at, in addition to a bunch of shops. And they had a little local homemade popsicle stand, and we got popsicles there, really interesting flavored popsicles, and talked to them a little bit, got some information I really wanted to run on the Bermuda Railway Trail, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and got some information from them. And then took the ferry over to St. George. It's a beautiful ferry ride, takes about 45 minutes or so. And then you're in this quaint little town that has a very colonial feel to it. At that point, it was lunchtime, and we went and I ate at Wahoo's, I believe. It was a highly ranked restaurant in Bermuda, and we sat down there, and I had the best fish sandwich I've ever had. Bermuda is famous for their fish sandwiches, and they put the fish on raisin bread, which is kind of unique. It was so good. And my family that doesn't eat seafood had some of the best chicken sandwiches they've ever had. So really good food. And then we walked around St. George a little bit and caught a bus to the Crystal Caves. And the Crystal Caves are one of the tourist highlights in Bermuda. If you're into caves, they're beautiful. There's a set of 2 caves. And this is something that they do reservations, but you have to call like 2 weeks out. And so we called 2 weeks out and got a reservation. The tricky thing a little bit was trying to figure out what time do I make my reservation for, because I know I'm going to take the ferry, I'm going to explore a little bit, and I'm going to catch the bus. And the buses in Bermuda don't run on a timetable that Google Maps can help you with. Like they'll have it leaves this point at this time, and here's rough travel times, but you're not getting an exact schedule like you'll get. Like when I used Google Maps in New York, it tells me exactly when public transit is supposed to be there and whatnot. So you kind of had to guess a little bit, but we gave ourselves a little bit of time. It all worked out great. We got there to the caves. There's the Crystal Cave and the Fantasy Cave, and you can buy one or the other or both. We had reserved a reservation for both, but when we got there, they warned us that it was high tide and the Fantasy Cave was a little bit flooded, and so they weren't allowing people in there. So we just did the Crystal Cave. Probably worked out for the best. I don't know if my kids would have wanted to see both caves. They're both very different in what they look like, but there's only so much that a kid can take of walking through and looking at really cool sculptures. I guess rock formations, stalactites, stalagmites. Crystal Caves, though, is beautiful. Really, really awesome cave. I don't think I've been in a cave quite like that before. I know there's some cool ones in the US. I just haven't been to any of them. We've got water inside of it, awesome photo ops, and you just kind of go down and walk through and take pictures, and they tell you the story of how it was found by a couple boys playing cricket. And so a really cool thing to do there. And then after the cave, we went back up and took the bus to downtown Hamilton. Got to walk around Hamilton a little bit. We discovered a lot of the shops there closed earlier than I expected. That ended up being okay. And then we took the ferry from Hamilton back to the ship in time to get ready and have dinner. Bermuda's kind of shaped like a big C. And so St. George is on one end and the ship dock's on the other. And so that's kind of why we did what we did, is we took the ferry and then kind of worked our way back. And then it's faster to take the ferry from Hamilton back to the port than it is to take the bus all the way. So that's kind of what led to our plans. But just really fun. It was very easy to use the public transit. We bought a pass. I guess I should mention that they sell the passes at the port. Amber was on previously and said they only take cash. They do take cards now as well. We had cash available, but they did take a card. I don't know if that's a recent change, but we just bought a multi-day pass so that we didn't have to worry about paying for each leg, and it ended up working out really, really well.
Amber was on episode with Tim, episode 374. And so they did talk a little bit about their port excursions to Bermuda as well. So if somebody is interested for a cruise in the future, even if it's a different cruise line, or when Disney is back with their Bermuda itineraries, then this could be helpful to deciding what to do and what worked out best.
And I will say Bermuda is just such a cool island. So it's a place I would want to go again, even if I couldn't go on Disney. So after that night, we went back to the ship, ate. And then the next morning I did, I think, my favorite thing. I alluded to, I really wanted to run on the Bermuda Railway Trail. So they used to have this narrow gauge railway that went all through the island, and now it's a trail system. And so I had looked in advance on Google Maps and found the closest entry point to the port. And it was almost runnable. I debated just running from the port there and then running on the trail. But the roads on Bermuda are very narrow and they don't really have sidewalks or much of a shoulder. And so I decided to take the bus. And you just get off the bus at the police station in Somerset, and the trail's right behind there. It's easily marked, very easy to find. I had a little bit of an issue because the early morning bus, I went out there and a bus went by and said, "Oh, I'm out of service." I'm like, "Wait, there's supposed to be a bus at this time. What's going on?" There were a couple guys who came over from the Royal Caribbean ship who were also waiting for the bus with me. And I think we went through 2 buses that wouldn't take us on board before one came a lot later than we anticipated. Ended up being fine. The buses in Bermuda, I found them to run regularly, but early mornings, apparently a little bit iffy. Got off there and then went for a run on this trail. I had expected it to be an unpaved trail. It is paved most of the way. And what's interesting is it's actually like a back alleyway in a lot of cases for people to access their property. So you'll see a lot of houses with garages off of it, and they'll drive onto the trail and get back onto the road or whatever. There wasn't a lot of traffic or anything on it. Saw plenty of locals or other people out running on it, but it was really cool. A lot more foliage than I expected, but also some awesome ocean views. And I ran down from there. It's about a mile or so to where there's a cutoff, and you can go up to Fort Scar. And so you can go up to this old fort that's on a hill, and they've got all the old ruins there. There's also a restroom, which is nice when you're running. And so check that out. And then I went back and kept running down to the world's smallest drawbridge, which is really, really cool. They've got like just a little bridge where it's just goes up enough in the middle so that a sailing ship with a tall mast can get through. And that's about it. Did that and then ran back to where the bus stop was and took the bus back to the port so I could join my family for that day's activities. But that trail was so much fun. Highly, highly recommend. As I say, I did Scar to Scar. I did, Disney Scar to Fort Scar. So it was really fun.
And Lake is now booking a cruise to Bermuda.
I am interested because that is a question that I typically get when I say I've ran places. Is they're like, oh, where did you run? And turning it back to you, did it feel like safe for the most part?
Yeah, that was one thing I was a little nervous about when I realized, so I'm going to get up early and go run on this trail by myself. Is that a great idea or not? I never felt unsafe. I saw plenty of locals out walking or running on their own. Like I said, some other people from the Royal Caribbean ship were going to hike the trail. You're never very far from civilization on that section, at least. There is a part where even you're kind of going on trail kind of joins a local road for a little bit and then goes off. And so I never felt like I was totally isolated. You got to do what you think's safest for you. But I didn't have any concerns, and it ended up being just a really fun experience.
But yes, Christy, I do think that sounds awesome. I would definitely go and do that.
So I guess after the run, I got back, and in fact, I think I messaged you, Christy, that as I got back, I was a little bit dirty, and the skies opened up and gave me a shower. I was walking on the dock to get back on the ship. So I went back in and got cleaned up a little bit, but we were going to the beach, so I didn't have to worry about getting too cleaned up. And this was our day to go to Horseshoe Bay Beach. We did decide to start a little later, which gave me more time to run, but also we had gone all day the day before, and it had been a lot for the kids. So they were a little tired, and we're happy to have a little bit of a later morning. We figured we'd have one more day, so it didn't matter too much. But just as we're getting off the ship, the captain makes an announcement that there's weather coming, and he says, hey, when we leave port tonight, we're not coming back tomorrow. We need to go beat this storm. And so you're only going to have 2 days in Bermuda, which was at first a little disheartening because we had a good time and we were just going to go to the beach, and we'd planned maybe 2 beach days. Suddenly found ourselves with just having 2. It also meant that all the shopping we had put off and said we'll do the last day after we've seen all the options, we were going to have to try and figure that out. Glad we knew then versus when we were coming back, because it kind of told us maybe we can't spend as long as the beach. But we walked down, we took the city bus to Horseshoe Bay Beach because we had bought our bus passes, and it's not a bad bus ride. They do drop you off on the main road, and you have to walk down kind of like the driveway to the beach, and it's a pretty decent walk, but it's all downhill, so it's not too bad. And then we got to the beach, and let me tell you, Horseshoe Bay Beach is one of the most beautiful beaches I've been. I think it definitely competes with Costa Rica for me, especially if you walk around some of the rocks on the end. You can go to some other areas that aren't as crowded that are also just stunning. The sand is pink hue. It's not like bright pink, but it has this pink hue. Water is beautiful. The water was warm. We were able to go enjoy. There was a little bit more surf action with the storm coming in, but it didn't feel unsafe. And we just had a great time on the beach. They do have amenities there. There's a place you can get drinks there. You could rent an umbrella. We didn't bother with that, but they have some food there as well. But just a great, great, great beach. We ended up deciding we needed to get back a little earlier. And so in addition to the public bus, there are like shuttles that run constantly that cost a little bit more. I don't remember exactly how much it was per person, but it wasn't bad. We were not going to take those because we, had bought bus passes, but we didn't really want to walk all the way up the hill, and we knew we had limited time now. So we just went ahead and paid to take a shuttle back. They were just kind of there constantly. The one con is they want to fill up the whole shuttle when there are 10 of you. That it's not a huge problem because you almost fill the whole shuttle yourself, but that would be the only delay they would have. And so we took the shuttle back and finished up the last of our shopping, did a little whirlwind shopping at the port before we got back on the boat to sail away. I do believe there were some pier runners, as I remember hearing. It all worked out well for us. And I think one of the things that gave me a lot of confidence, even this day where we weren't having an overnight, originally I thought, well, if we get stuck on Bermuda night 2, they're coming back on night 3, no big deal. But one of the things I really liked is there were just lots of options for transportation. So we took the public bus, but knew that there were shuttles if we wanted them, ended up taking that back. But there are also the option for taxi cabs. And so, when you have 3 different transportation options somewhere, you feel pretty confident you can get back to the ship on time.
So how did Disney end up filling that extra day then? Was it just a sea day for you?
It was a sea day. They just wanted to get ahead of the weather. We ended up later hearing somebody knew someone there was another cruise line that was coming in when we were leaving, and they ended up coming in and sticking around, and heard from them the weather was not great. And then they had a nasty sailing back, but our captain found sunny sailing. We had a beautiful sea day. So I don't know, maybe he just knew if he got out of there a little early, they'd pull it off, but we had a beautiful sea day. And as I said, I missed a day in Bermuda, but I got stuck in the spa, sitting on a lounge or in a private, the semi-private hot tub for a few hours. So, I can't really complain. Disney seemed to have lots of activities going on that day, but I honestly spent the morning in the spa. So
good for you.
It was great. It's always sad to have interruption like that, but we sail a lot in October because it is a little bit less expensive time and my kids have a nice fall break, but you do know that weather is much less predictable and really it can happen at any time, but you just kind of have to go in with that. And so, yeah, it's sad to miss another day in Bermuda, but it really wasn't a big deal for us. And I can't complain about a sea day, especially where the captain found such beautiful weather. It was just awesome.
Well, as we turn to disembarkation back in New York, we already talked a little bit about that experience sailing back in, enjoying your veranda there. A couple last minute questions. Did you have any notable interactions with cast that you wanted to highlight?
Well, that's always a good question. We had lots of good experiences. I just loved our serving team. They were just top notch. Room service was great too, but I think some of my favorite interactions, all my kids commented on as well. We just really, really enjoyed our servers. Of course, now that I'm saying that, I can't remember their names. I have them written down. I'll have to go look them up, but that was really positive. They were all wonderful.
Okay. And then turning it towards your sister, since it was her first sailing, what would you say would be like some of her places from the ship or some of her favorite activities that she got to experience on the sailing?
I think she loved that her kids were able to go have a vacation while she and her husband got to have a vacation. Like they had heard that that's why we like to cruise, and then they got to experience, and they were like, oh, that's really fun. She also loved trivia and loved the shows. So I think overall it was a very positive experience. When she came back, her kids were asking, when are we going to go on another cruise? She had told me going in, we'll probably be one and done because we like to experience different things every time we go on a trip. But her kids immediately were like, we want to go on another cruise with our cousins. So we'll see if that happens someday in the future. But it was a dream vacation in every way. We'd both look forward. We both are people who are very motivated by our upcoming trips and travel. And so it was very nice to see that it was everything we really hoped for.
Awesome. Well, before we close this out, Bryan, what's next for you guys?
So I said I was going to take a break from cruising. Then I saw the triple dip itinerary on the Fantasy in October. So we are going to hit Castaway Cay twice and Lighthouse Point and Nassau in October on the Fantasy, and are super looking forward to that.
That sounds like quite an amazing itinerary as two people who are getting ready for a triple dip sailing as well.
Yep.
That's right. You guys are doing the inaugural?
Yes.
We are.
Lighthouse Point? Is that a triple dip?
It is. So it's 2 days though at Lighthouse Point and then 1 day at Castaway.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's going to be exciting. It'll be exciting.
Yeah,
we are hyped for this, which we will have a Patreon episode talking about our planning and what we've booked coming out real soon. I think that is a great place to wrap up the show. Bryan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing you and your family's experience sailing on the Disney Dream down to Bermuda. And we definitely hope to have you on again after your fantasy sailing.
Sounds great. I look forward to it. And as always, it's always fun to come on and talk about Disney Cruise Line with fellow cruise enthusiasts.
And Bryan has written a blog post for me, which will be published by the time this episode airs. So if you want to see how to do Bermuda on your own, you can go to Pack Your Pixie Dust and look it up. That way you can do a search for Bermuda, or it'll be probably either the most recent or the second most recent blog post. You can also, hopefully Lake can put it in the show notes, and then you should be able to click through there and click to read the article, because Bryan talks about just really how, like, the websites he used and really how to do Bermuda on your own, if that's something you're looking to do in the future.
Yeah, I'll make sure that ends up in the show notes for this episode, which you will be able to find in your description wherever you watch this or on the DCL Podcast website. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show. Once again, we want to thank Bryan for coming on and sharing his adventures sailing to Bermuda on the Disney Dream. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We would also like to thank our Patreons who make this show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by joining our community by visiting patreon.com/DCL Podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.